Tori May, it's great to have you on the Data Strategy Show. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm really well, thanks, Samir. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be invited by you here, and yeah, looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. It's really great to have you. So, first things first, the listeners who will be listening to this don't know who Tori May is. So, why don't you just give us a good 30,000-foot view of, who you are and what you've done?
Sure. Firstly, obviously, I'm Tori May. I was raised, Samir, I was born in London and then grew up in Norfolk. So,
Okay, very nice.
Norfolk girl at heart.
Yeah.
But since then, sort of moved around, university in Sheffield, Manchester, London, Madrid, now in Saffron Walden near Cambridge.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been an interesting ride, sort of location wise. And I guess from sort of a personal perspective, I went to university in Sheffield, studied international business with French and Spanish. Spent a year living in Madrid and working in Madrid, which was
Cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
After that, I left university and I ended up in the world of tech. I say ended up. I chose to do that. Sort of working actually quite importantly with a company that was working with graduates to support them going into the workplace. So not like a graduate scheme as such, but kind of heading in there. Ended up working for some amazing companies in tech. So started off in Computer Associates, BMC, Rackspace, GFI Software. So yeah, spent my early career. That was sort of over 20 years ago now, so 24 years ago maybe.
Yeah, wow.
In that scene, which is probably part of why I'm here today.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of the landscape changed. I left that industry. I had my first child 15 years ago, and the world back then, Samir, was very different in terms of motherhood, support, flexibility.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm sure you can appreciate sort of having our chat. And spent some time out, sort of obviously raising children, had 3 children, working part-time alongside that in sales roles, managing sales teams in a very different industry, and then went on to set up and co-found my own street food business. And we worked, for 8 years doing street food, corporate hospitality. Amazing, absolutely incredible. Later went on to co-found a cafe bistro, so completely different sector to tech.
It is.
Yeah. It was quite interesting. I'm half Peruvian, so yeah, my passions have also been in sort of food and hosting, hospitality, and then more recently, this year, I have gone back into the world of tech. So I'm now working from a very different perspective in a B2B marketing agency. It's been around for 20 years, called Pure Channels, and excited to be back. So there's a whistle stop tour of my background.
I just want to speak about food now.
Of course you do. Have you had breakfast?
I haven't had breakfast. You're going to make me really hungry. I don't tend to have breakfast anymore, so I eat at about midday or about around 1 o'clock if I can push it.
Yeah, it's also brunch these days, I think.
Yes, it's all this intermittent fasting and stuff like that. They've put it all into our brains.
Totally.
It's all taken over. Can't have fun these days. No. So look, that's really interesting. And one of the things that I heard that you say in there is when you first started your tech career, and then you went into food, and then you went back, you made a statement. You said the landscape has changed. And I just wanted to understand and explore what changes you see from back when you were in tech and then, departing and doing something completely different, which is amazing. And then getting back into tech. And obviously, this season, as you know, is all about women. Yeah. It's all about their experiences. And, you've had to go off and raise children and commend you for that, because my wife had to do the same.
Thank you.
And she's also equally going back into the workplace now, and that mindset is very difficult to get over, because you feel like you've lost all your value. And I don't know what your experiences were about that. Maybe first the landscape thing changing, and maybe we can get into that sort of work life and flexibility, and how you sort of cope with that.
Sure. No, that's a really interesting point, and I thank you as well for that commendation, because it is something that is a huge step when women
Absolutely
choose to have a family, or the people choose to have a family, and you're already in a career you've worked very hard to be in as well. I think in terms of like the landscape, obviously 20 years ago is another lifetime, right? I think not only just in terms of the practical support that's out there, that's happening within companies to try and support women and caregivers in place, but I think also it's about sort of the culture and the mindset has changed. There's a lot more sort of support, mentorship, allies. There's a lot more, I guess, maybe from the emotional side of it, as well as the professional sort of career side as well. And I think that's been interesting to see. Back then, I think flexibility, I'm not sure whether that word existed back then. It was also very much before COVID as well, and structures different, right? Structures were really different in sort of big and small corporate organizations in sort of tech sales. So extremely different.
And so there's more of a sort of forgiveness now, right? Because we've had this COVID outbreak, we've been able to work from home, and everybody's seen the different side of it now, and they've realized, we do have families. And then they've also seen the amount of work that a mother needs to do. And I think that's quite stark for me, because I was fortunate that I worked from home, so I could see that. But there are things that women take on way more than the sort of responsibility for bringing up children. And it can be from helping them with their homework, or just getting just sitting down and chatting with them, and and not to say that men don't do that. Naturally we do, but I think there's a different intensity to it.
Sure.
And perhaps that's the thing that also needs to be thought about, because it is a being a mother is definitely something that's very different to being the usual 2.4 children family, nuclear family, of father goes to work, brings in the cash, and mother stays at home and raises the children, takes them to school, has the kitty lunches, and the usual things that
the old-fashioned sort of view.
So sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. And I think in terms of that landscape, definitely now, I think having a family and being a parent has become such more visible, but also you're allowed to show that it's become very much accepted. I think firstly, when I was working many years ago, it was sort of a strange thing that you sort of couldn't show that you were a parent, or that you wanted a baby, or that you were going to have it, because the expectations are, and very much so, is this person able to continue to do their job, to progress, to hit their targets? And I think now having that visibility and saying, listen, I've got some boundaries, because I do have children, and because having kids is a full-time job. It's almost as if there was a period where people just forgot that children needed to be looked after, and of course, we've all been there, and we've all worked very closely with nannies and au pairs, and myself included, to do that, to allow you to continue. But but I think it's great now that you can say, hey, listen, I am a mum, I am a dad. That's a real role as well. And if I'm a better mum, I will be a better person at work. That's totally,
and
you know.
And it's interesting you say that, because it took a pandemic for that to become the norm.
Yeah.
So if we hadn't had a pandemic, we would have been, doing the same.
Yeah.
We would have, as you say, brushing it under the carpet, or, not really, talking about it. Although I'm assuming that, very different things that have happened even over the time that you have experienced your first, life in tech. And then going into the food business, and then going back into tech. So while things have changed in tech from the previous, sort of your experiences, maybe it wasn't just the pandemic that took that. Maybe there were undercurrents that were changing anyway. And I'm assuming that naturally, I think the pandemic just accelerated those things.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And helped it along. So. But what do you find? Because it will be interesting for me to understand from where you were in tech to now. What are the differences? And I think you've talked about the good things, but what are still some of the challenges that you see, or that you've observed? Which kind of still come up in your head and say, oh, that's not, that hasn't changed. What would you say they are?
I think the gap. I think the gap in terms of female leaders, the gap in terms of females in tech, in sales, it still exists. And I think there's kind of like a systemic change that needs to happen with that. I think organizations are working really hard, and there's, really important voices out there working hard for females in the industry. Not sure if you managed to read that book that I mentioned to you, was The Female Sales Leader, which was
I didn't. No, I haven't had a chance to read it.
It's brilliant. And you know what? It's been amazing to read that now, coming back into the industry, because that brings together a huge amount of stories that the three authors have collected. And it's like a collection of voices of things that have worked, things that haven't worked, from the same time that I've been in, and the different stories of how different women have been able to stay in their careers, how different people have had to exit their careers, how people have not maybe had to but wanted to. But then it's about sort of the support that's involved in going and then coming back somewhere after you've been on maternity leave. And then I guess, also, how do you make this all work at home as well? Because it's about help at the home, help in the workplace. So yeah, it's interesting. I think there's definitely more voices out there now, and I think whilst there's a gap, I think that gap is going to close. You mentioned yourself having children, and I think it's encouraging for me to see that such a lot has changed. Way to go, but there are lots of things happening from a support practice, and companies as well, such as different platforms like Women Returners. There's a new one called Ivy. Have you heard of Ivy?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. And it's
what's Ivy about?
So it's a platform designed by two sisters, because they saw how difficult it was for their own mother to return to the workplace after having children.
Interesting.
And so it's support from both sides. So it's actually giving employers sort of an accelerated way, I guess, to bring in really great talent, build a community of people who've all been in this, I guess, same place. I think, from, I guess, that word imposter syndrome sort of that is buzzing around, what even is that?
We're going to get onto that, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's great seeing that there's stuff happening, and there's people listening. People are listening. The people that can help support that change are listening, I think, and that's really, really great.
I had some statistics that I thought I'd just throw out, because because we discussed certain areas that we want to sort of zoom into. You know, and here's an interesting one, which around the workplace culture, retention, and exit. And I know that we spoke about this earlier. And I think this is quite a stark sort of view that I'm reading. It's from a survey that Computing. It was in Computing magazine.
Okay.
And it's called the Lovelace Report.
Yeah.
And what it states is that 80% of women working in tech are looking for the exit. Now, you know, that's scary, because, you know, there is that's a big number, 80%. And I'm just wondering whether, you know, what you said earlier about the book and about those three people and their experiences, and when you said one had to go, you know, one had to leave, one sort of said, well, you know, I'm going to stay, but there's things I need to do, and the other one, well, you know, work through it. It's that, you know, what is happening, or what do you think's happening that is leading to such big numbers of, you know, and I think there was something in the Times a couple of weeks ago where Martha Lane Fox was told by a CEO, women are done in tech, you know, a blanket statement, which, you know, I don't know enough of, and I should kind of, you know, find the article. It's probably behind a paywall, but I'm sure, you know, there must be an iteration of it somewhere. Well, what do you think are the factors around that? Maybe there's some personal experience or people you've spoken to. It's just kind of crazy that we're seeing big numbers. That is
a huge number, and, you know, also quite a worrying number. I mean, obviously the reasons behind that, I'd love to read that report, you know, as to what they say those reasons are behind that. Behind that stat.
There's three distinct reasons that they have. One is dissatisfaction, limited direction, and career progression. And that's about 25% of those 80. Lack of recognition is about 17%. Inadequate pay is about 15%.
Yeah.
But, you know, those three areas are the most painful out of that 80%. I don't know what the others are. The other thing that it does go on to say is that, actually, this is from another report, which is a Women in Tech survey that was done, I think, to about 4,300 women globally, that nearly 50.8% of women reporting experiencing sexism in the workplace, and 49.1% feel pressure to choose between family and career. So going back to the three authors, you know, was there an instance where somebody had to say, I've got to make the choice, either it's my career or my family? And, you know, and that work-life balance, which is what we talked about earlier. First, you know, I don't know if you've got, you know, you want to talk to that 80%, because that's also, you know, it's still an interesting stat. And we can get onto the other ones. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there to see, you know, what your experiences were.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's interesting, those three points that you raise. I think there's a huge amount around leadership and differences between sort of male and female leadership with women. You know,
and what would you say those differences are?
I think sometimes those differences are around how people have the confidence to lead with certain issues or challenges that maybe females would have within the workplace. You know, maybe it's an experience. I mean, I've had experience of brilliant female and male leaders across my previous career. You know, and I think it's probably like, how does that leadership work? You know, is it more from sort of a project base? Is it more from an emotional perspective? I think you've mentioned before in your podcast that you've led female teams before, and that you've had to sort of change your perspective on how that works. And I think, you know, for anyone, it's about having that connection, that really great connection, because, you know, to get results, you've got to enjoy working on what you're doing. but also there's a human element about you've got to get the job done as well. And I think sometimes women, it's about that thing where people are applying for jobs. They say, a man will apply even if he doesn't tick all of the boxes.
Right.
You must have heard this. Whereas a woman will want to, be able to actually be able to tick every single one of those boxes. And I think it's about, the opportunities in the workplace and having a voice where you feel like you are able to have a voice to progress, to not feel so dissatisfied that you want to leave. You can see that there's progression, that there are people advocating for you, and that the company as a whole has got that culture. It's not, sometimes it's not just about a one person, decision, is it? It's about how do you feel as a whole within the environment? Is it like a culture? Is it like a head of people that's kind of driving that brilliant change and feeling in the company?
So it's an interesting one that you bring up, culture, because I'm as you said that, I just thought to myself, I've experienced instances in the culture of organizations when I was working in corporate where we swung too far over, and the political correctness piece sort of became too invasive, and that was certainly my experience. Do you think political correctness has made people fear saying things, or just being open? Because I remember a friend telling me, who worked at a very large corporate investment bank, and he said he'd worked with somebody for about 10 years, and the banter between them was quite normal. And they would shoot the breeze about stuff. And then one morning he gets into the lift, and he says, "You look great." And 15 minutes later, he's called into HR. And I think that's a very strange. And again, I don't know what the instance was. Whether there was it was just a really bad morning that person had. I had no clue. But for him to feel that, it was like, oh my God! But we've drank beers together. We've said crazy things to each other, and then suddenly I've complimented somebody, and it's gone down the wrong way. And I'm just wondering whether this has played into the sort of the basis of where people are not them. They can't be themselves anymore. And yes, of course, we don't want someone to come out and talk bad of others and bring sexism into the workplace and whatever. We know those things still exist when we see lots of the things that are going on in the world, and misogyny, and certainly in the Metropolitan Police, what's happening at the moment, and the things that have come up. But I'm just wondering whether you feel as a woman, and I haven't asked any of the women so far this question, because it's only as you started to talk about the culture. Is this political correctness a good thing, and or has it really gone too far where people just cannot be themselves anymore?
Yeah, it's a really good question, I think, with so many.
Yes, I know.
But I do think, actually, obviously I haven't gone from a like to like organization, sort of large sort of American to a smaller scale business, but I can see now, and obviously following the trends and the reports as I've kind of gone through, I think it means that people are conscious whether they're saying the right thing, right? And so I think there is this difference as well between people of my age and also the new people coming through the system. We've got new graduates, we've got new people coming into schemes that are enabling people apprenticeships, so many apprenticeships. I think how I sort of entered that many years ago, I think would be very different now. I think the HR style is very different, and you're right. Maybe it scares people, because you don't understand it, right? Because you don't know, oh, am I allowed to say that? Am I not allowed to say that?
And it's a good thing that you brought up, because I think it's an age factor.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think you're absolutely right, because if I reflect on, how I, and we're probably very similar age, I think.
May I ask how old you are?
Well, I'll tell everybody.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't.
No. Yeah. Well, but I'll tell you offline. But I think it is, that sort of realigning yourself and with the things of now, but still being able to be real about life as well, which is
exactly.
I think that's something that we can't, put our heads in the sand and, sort of say that none of this stuff can be discussed, because then that's not really healthy either.
Sure. Also, how are people being taught these new rules? For
right.
myself, obviously, what was appropriate to say or to lead people back years ago.
Yeah.
How is that sort of being approached, as time goes through and goes on? It's great for the new wave of people, a new wave of leaders coming through. However, I think, and I think that's probably where, organizations that help people get back into a workplace after an extended break. I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not part of that. I haven't been part of it, but
sure.
I'm sure that that's a huge part of, I guess, an onboarding process, because it's about prepping people for going in places now, isn't it? You want people to succeed, but people to go in and not take all the personality out of yourself, because
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
I never really thought about that, actually.
But your personality is a huge part of yourself and your job, but then we're all expected to have sort of a professional version of that as well. How do you use it?
I think you're right, and I think there's something really interesting here that you've picked up on, because returning mothers or returning fathers, if they took a long time out and decided to look after kids, they've stuck in the way that they've always thought, that the corporate field is, and their experiences. And I think now when people go back, returning mums or returning dads, it's actually a real big cultural jump. And we all think, as parents, we're really trendy with our kids, but we're not, because they look at us and say, "Oh my God, you're so old," and we don't say those kind of words anymore. I just think of what's his name, Steve Coogan's character,
Alan Partridge.
Alan Partridge, how he's so funny like that. But yeah, it's and I think there is a bit of lip service, actually, that corporations are doing. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, because, I run my own company, so I don't necessarily have an understanding. But from where I've spoken to people who are of my age and who are in that corporate world, a lot of them said, they just get a training session and they're supposed to completely switch and change everything that they, know. And, and I think that's also not enough, perhaps, because there is a big difference between Generation X and snowflakes and Gen Zs and all. I mean, it's massive differences.
It's huge.
Millennials and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you see sort of offline and online around that is so different as well, isn't it? So many differences that actually. And it's going to take time, right, for new things to be implemented. It's not an overnight fix. It's not a one training session thing, is it?
I think you're right. But then I think the converse needs to happen, doesn't it? Maybe those newbies need to understand the old mentality as well.
Maybe.
Maybe they need to understand where we've come from, and and possibly their parents, or if their parents are slightly younger, then they may not have that sort of experience. But It's an interesting one, and I think we could get into a very, very different conversation. But I wanted to come back to something that you mentioned earlier: imposter syndrome, confidence. That's come up many, many times in my conversations. What is the biggest, what is this thing, and why does it still plague, all of us today, and specifically women? When you talked about, the whole idea of not ticking all the boxes and so on, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, I think that word has been used obviously a lot more frequently than any other kind of decade or era that we've been in. It's like, it's out there, isn't it? And everyone's talking about it, but what does it actually mean? And I think it means something different to everybody.
Yes. When did it come out, though? Because it's a new term, in the sense of, it only maybe the last 4 or 5 years that people started talking about.
I think it could be used as sort of an excuse for something. But also, I think imposter syndrome, I think it just means it's not like a failing. It's not like anything like that. I think it's more about when you feel like you're the only one. That's that to me, that's what it feels like. And I think kind of getting over that is actually when you hear other people in similar situations, when you hear what other people have done, then you can just go, well, actually, it's fine, because I'm not the only one who's ever done this, done that, done the other. I'm not the only one who's trying to do X, Y, Z. I'm not the only one who's got to do X, Y, Z project, And I think just hearing and having people share their experiences, which is brilliant what you've been doing with this series of women, I think personally, because everyone's got a story, and whilst it's not kind of necessarily exactly the same as yours, and while you don't necessarily need to relate exactly to my story or your other stories, we've all got the same thing going on underneath, right? We're all human. We've all we're all going to work. We're all trying to grow. We're all trying to be kind and be the best we can and succeed and move through our lives. And actually, I think it's, as soon as you start hearing things about different communities, then that feeling of being the only one. I'm not going to call it. I hate that word, imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yeah. I do find it's an odd one, because I think everybody's, from whence I can remember, coming out of university and going into my first role, it's like, well, I'm a clean slate. I don't know much about this stuff. Yeah. I may have learnt the theory, but I don't know. Is that imposter syndrome? And then going into my first proper career after my graduate career. Well, now I know a little bit more, but I'm now going to experience more stuff, and I'm going to learn a huge amount. So I won't know everything, but that's imposter. So I think this is just I think they give tags to things because they want people to feel somehow that they've then got. I think it's also about selling stuff. Quite frankly. So this thing about imposter syndrome gives people a complex, and then they feel like they've got to kind of, I've got to really battle it now. I've got to get over it. Oh my God, it's bad for me, and I can't do this now because oh my God, they've told me I'm an imposter. For God's sake,
we don't need a webinar on it. We don't need that. It's a good thing. It's a bit like nerves, isn't it? Or worry or anxiousness or whatever you want to call it. Of course, if we're speaking on a stage, or of course we're going into an interview, or of course we're going into a meeting, there's those feelings that you have, but they're only natural. I think they're only natural. And if you don't have them, then you become sort of like this robotic, person that doesn't have that. So I think, and obviously I think imposter syndrome is, for everybody. It's not just women.
Sure.
But I think if there's, processes in work, if there's processes in management, leadership, career growth to help support what, where people want to go or what they want to do or what project they're working on, then you shouldn't need to have this thing, should you, of imposter syndrome, because you should be able to talk it through and say, hey, listen, this is, this is something that's either worrying me or
Yeah.
that I feel I can't do. And then, working through that rather than just putting it in a box and putting a word on it that makes
I
it
think,
impossible.
yeah, I think you're right about that. I think, where I think there needs to be better approaches to this, and I think it's for everybody, as you said, it's not just women who go through it. There needs to be better mentorship then, and the availability for mentorship up and down, not just mentors for the top people in organizations, and equally coaching facilities where somebody who needs to get through something that like you said earlier, if a woman feels like they don't tick all the boxes, well, let's then kind of work through that. And what do you mean by you don't tick all the boxes? And I have these conversations with my wife all the time because I now see how much probably I've sort of said no, of course you can do that, of course you can, because I think she's got those, but she doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, like when you mentioned about coaching and mentorship, that's one of the things that I've seen change from then to now so much more, but in a brilliant way. Organizations putting this in place for people, but actually using it as a positive thing. I think before it was more like, if you needed coaching, you couldn't really do stuff, so you needed to get someone on board to help you get better or whatever, and it had a different connotation to it, whereas now it's kind of accepted. And I've have worked with brilliant coaches, and I've seen brilliant organizations such as Coach Hub. There's mentorship organizations just for women as well, which is really important, because we do have a very different experience. If you've taken time out to have kids and coming back, that's mentally crazy. It's big. And
what is so you've just said that mentally it's big, and how did it affect you? What were the things that you sort of were hesitant about, or had to think differently after, obviously after 15 years or whatever it was that you took that time out? So what was it?
What the bigness of
you mentioned it just there. You said the big things of coming back. What are those things? Just, I'm thinking about all those people who might be listening who are trying to get back into work, and they're also having the same.
I think it's what you said at the beginning. I think it's about when you take time out, when you stop doing something, whatever that is, and it doesn't need to be coming back into the same industry. For example, people go out of an industry and then try and come back in after having children, and that period has been quite an extended period of time. You can feel like you have less value, that you don't have the knowledge, that you're not up to speed with things. And I think that's the truth, right? That is the truth, because how can you, if you're in an environment where you're in it every day? I just think, what's to say that you can't do that? What's to say that you can't start again? You can't go and learn stuff. People are learning every day. It was really interesting, actually. A conference that I went to, you've probably heard of it, Women of Silicon Roundabout.
I've never heard of it.
Okay, so it was
never.
Have you? Okay. It was at
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, Women of Silicon Roundabout. And it was brilliant. There were some really amazing women senior leaders standing up, keynotes, doing presentations, and actually the theme about it was really, them being quite humble around how they got to their positions and the support that they've received. And for me, that's really important, just hearing other people sort of having a similar experience, or wanting to do something that means a big change, and things like that. I think are brilliant, that you can go and listen and learn from other people. But yeah, it's big. Having kids is big, isn't it? It's
it is.
whether you're having them and then looking after them yourself, or whether you're having them, you are returning to a senior role, it's really important.
Of course.
How are you able to manage that in the workplace? What are those expectations, those boundaries? What do people think of you when you go back in? Do they think that you can do both?
Yes.
It's quite a lot of.
So it's not only you thinking that they're questioning you, it's you questioning yourself as well.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yes.
all the time, and saying, oh my God, I'm just coming back. Can I do this now? Do I have the energy after looking after these, do I have the brain capacity? It's all of the stuff that, that anybody, I think, would have a kind of question to themselves about. So
completely. I mean, it's different. Like my kids are a lot older now, and obviously I've sort of been running my own businesses for the past few years. But if you're coming back after your 1 year maternity year, that's incredible to try to come back in. And then there's also things such as changes of accounts that you could be worried about. Going to lose your key accounts, responsibility. Much can change when you're away.
Of course.
Fear of coming back and having something changed while you're away is also another thing of one of the stories in the books as well that comes up of the book that I mentioned, that it's fear of what's happening while you're not there. You lose a sort of control over what you've built up, and that's tricky. But obviously a business has to continue running whilst, of course. Actually, there's something that I saw called guesting on accounts, and it's kind of this terminology where accounts get changed over, and it's called guesting. So someone to those accounts,
that account.
The real sort of plan around commissions and ownership and things like that. That's brilliant, but some companies don't do any of this. So you either come back and for myself, the opportunities were very inflexible. And then sort of where do you go from there, really? So
and that's very and obviously that's very much in the sales environment, because sales is a very high-paced, active, you've got targets and so on. And for those people who are in different roles, and they're maybe they're a developer, or they come back and it's like, well, suddenly, a year or a year and a half or whatever, things have changed. We've accelerated so quickly in development tools, and now I need to learn something else. What do I do? So it's really interesting. We've gone over. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you the final question that I ask everybody. Yeah. What 3 things would you say to those women, females, young students who are thinking about getting into tech, or data, or just a career, in tech? And equally, what would you also think about to those, and say to those women who are returning after a long career break, and dealing with all those insecurities within themselves? What, you take either. Maybe it's I'll leave it for you to kind of.
Okay, so the first thing, the 3 things I would say for people coming up, I'd say curiosity, definitely. Yep. If there's something, and there is curiosity, it's tech. Our whole world is full of it, whether you like it, whether you don't.
Yeah.
Curiosity is the best thing. So if you're curious, go and find that, go and do that. Yep. And there's so many organizations in tech, ed tech. It doesn't need to be a traditional tech that people think about. There's a lot of different things. The other thing I would say is authenticity. I think authenticity is really important, to be yourself. And we all try and think about what is authenticity, but I think just being yourself, and come in and be honest and authentic. If you want to do something, go and find that route, explore it. The third one I would say is, to any sort of females coming through this, I say, if you feel like you don't have a place at that table, you do. There is always a place, I think. It's just finding that, and there will be a place for you. And I think there's really great stuff happening. So there are those three things for that question. And then I think people returning, it's use your network, It's, it's really important to chat to people that build up. And I think having that network is so brilliant in any industry that you've been in, sort of a professional network, it can be personal one. These are the people that kind of know you and have known you for years, and they're going to be your best kind of sponsors and allies, and the people that know you and know your capabilities. And I think sometimes it's good to like pull upon other people's interests in yourself so that you can put it all together. So
absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Fantastic. Well, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been super cool speaking to you. We have gone over time, but hopefully that's okay with you.
That's fine with myself. It's been great, so interesting, and I once again thank you so much for
it's a pleasure.
putting this series on. It's something great and something that so many people will get from, hopefully, as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Tori May. Thank you for coming on and being yourself and being authentic.
Pleasure.
And I wish you the best of today and the weekend.
Many thanks. You too. Catch up soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samir. Bye.
Bye.